Chapter 7. The Way of the Sorcerer. Brand kindles till they brown out, flame is quickened by flame. One man from another is known by his speech. Now is answered what you ask of the runes graven by the gods, made by the All-Father, sent by the powerful sage. LT is best for man to remain silent. Havamal, words of the High One. He ran with a steady, rhythmic pace, steaming with each breath and holding the sword at his side. Not too fast, not too slow. He could run for miles like this, as long as he kept the rhythm.
"Why are you running?"
Sifril asked, hovering near his head.
"I've been standing still for too long,"
he replied, leaping over a fallen log on the path. A halo of shimmering sparks still surrounded him, and his moving hands left a faint glow behind. They reached the top, and Vuko stopped suddenly.
"Do you know what this can do? What are its limits? How to use it?"
"I don't know anything that you don't know.
She replied.
Try moving something with your mind. Just focus and do it."
Drakanen sat down on a boulder and chose a rock standing on a nearby outcrop. One of those irritating mushroom-shaped formations that appear among limestone crags. They look like they should have fallen long ago, yet they've stood for thousands of years. He stretched out his hand.
"I feel like an idiot,"
he said.
"Should I say something? Abracadabra?"
"I don't know, focus, just like when you moved the horseshoe."
"I didn't do anything special then."
He sat for a while with his hand extended.
"Fall,"
he whispered.
"Fall, Pudota. Alas."
Nothing happened, except that it started to drizzle. He began imagining the rock's structure breaking apart, crystalline formations of minerals, even atomic bonds snapping. Then he lost his patience. He stood up, wrapping his cloak around himself, and started walking downhill. As he left, he scooped a handful of the shimmering air, as if making a snowball, and pretended to throw it.
"Perkele Kallio,"
he spat.
"Jabal Tebe Pass. We're going, Kifral."
The bang sounded like a mortar fire. The base of the stone shattered in a cloud of whistling fragments, and the boulder somersaulted through the air, crashing downward with a whoosh of torn air. Just as it slammed into the scree with a deafening crash, the stone spire next to it crumbled, breaking into several pieces and collapsing slowly like a demolished building, kicking up a column of dust. Then the slope came alive. With a terrifying roar, an avalanche of rocks, stones, and debris tumbled down the narrow valley, crushing everything in its path until it reached the nearby forest. The treetops bowed majestically. A cloud of grey dust enveloped the trees like a tidal wave, and several fell with a crack. It lasted about a minute before silence fell, broken only by the indignant cawing of birds swirling above the dust-covered grove. That part of the slope was now unrecognizable. Drakanen lay on the path in a strange position, with his legs hanging off the edge of the slope, clutching a bush that was grey with dust. He pulled himself up and crawled back onto the path. Then he sat down, spitting out sand mixed with saliva. His forehead was cut, his shoulder painfully bruised, and a few sharp rock fragments as thin as needles were embedded in his hand. He pulled them out with his teeth and looked at the ruined edge of the forest.
"Jabemti Dushu,"
he muttered.
"I hope no one was out there picking mushrooms. Was that supposed to be a throw?"
He scooped up a much smaller amount of the shimmering diamond-like mist around him and flung it at another rock. Nothing happened except the aura surrounding Drakanen rippled slightly.
"I need to practice,"
Vuko said.
"Best somewhere secluded."
"What are you so happy about? Because you smashed a rock?"
"No. I did it unintentionally, and it turned out to be unpredictable. That's a failure, not a success. It works like a grenade, and I need it to work like a pistol. No. I'm happy because I'm alive. I feel alive. They turned me into a tree, and I'm alive. I woke up naked in the mountains, and I'm alive. I entered the charm spot, and I'm still alive. It lifts your spirits, you know."
He was descending the mountain in long strides when he suddenly stopped and belted out in a loud, vibrating Balkan voice.
Hej, doktore! Sercem nie boli! Na ljubavi nema lijeka, ne pomoże apoteka. Hej, doktore, ja, ho!
Kipral looked at him with a mix of indignation and concern. The cottage of the song singer stood just as he had left it, nestled against the rock like a rotting mushroom, surrounded by crooked menhir stones. Below, a waterfall roared, throwing up a cloud of mist.
Hello, Bonswift! I'm back!
The scout called out cheerfully. Silence, the sound of the waterfall, and a strange whimpering answered him. Vuko entered between the stone pillars, suddenly uneasy, and stopped.
Glyphnock?
He asked uncertainly. The Yeti sat curled up under the palisade, rocking back and forth and clearly sobbing. Tears streamed down his wrinkled flat face, dripping from his bear-like fangs.
What happened to you, Grendel?
Drakanen asked, his tone a little gentler than usual.
It hurts,
The monster whimpered, speaking in a slurred but understandable voice.
I want to my daddy.
Jebemti Maiku.
Muttered Drakanen, going pale as a sheet. The memory of the menhir at the charm spot flashed before his eyes. The menhir with a chain hanging from it, ending in shackles. A perfect place where someone might have chained up a pregnant woman. Someone who needed her child to mutate into a monster to protect and advertise his business. And now the unfortunate ape-man was in pain and missing his dad. The diamond mist around the scout seemed to thicken and began swirling like an atomic orbital.
Bonswift!
Vuko shouted and rushed toward the house. The door opened as soon as he reached for it, but he didn't even notice. The wooden latch snapped with a deafening crack, and the pieces ricocheted off the walls with a whistle. Bonswift jumped up from his favorite spot by the hearth, dropping a jug, and reached for his crooked staff in a flash. Too late. Drakanen felt a tingling on his skin, as if the aura surrounding him had become tangible. At first, he didn't pay attention to it. The powers of the charm spot, magical mists and other nonsense evaporated from his mind in an instant. He intended to grab the mage by the throat, slam him against the wall, or possibly just kick him senseless. Then he would decide what to do next. A few seconds passed, during which a tornado raged inside the hut. Broken jugs, rags, pieces of fur, and smaller furniture flew through the air. A rack holding an odd ceremonial armor suddenly toppled backward as if it had fainted. A row of spears embedded themselves in the wall, and a jug full of beer exploded like it had been hit by a rocket, splattering its contents all over the walls. Drakanen, ignoring everything else, jumped over the table and grabbed Bonswift by the throat, pressing his thumb and forefinger on either side of his larynx to squeeze the artery.
Did you chain her up at the charm spot?
He screamed.
You wanted her to give birth to a monster, Pasikurchu. Where are his parents, you bastard? What did you do with them, you filth?
He didn't even realize he was shouting in Croatian. Being thoroughly choked, Bonswift obviously couldn't make any coherent sounds, only emitting a dull gurgling while futilely scratching and pulling at the hand, crushing him. It went on for a few moments as Drakanen tightened his grip, spitting out terrible Finnish curses, while everything in the room overturned, flew around and shattered, as if an invisible maniac was wreaking havoc. Bonswift's dog-like hazel eyes rolled back, revealing a narrow strip of bloodshot white. His heels scraped the floor as he struggled more weakly and convulsively, and then Vuko regained control and suddenly loosened his grip. Bonswift collapsed face-first onto the table, coughing and wheezing as he gasped for air. With one swift motion, Drakanen ripped a strap from a beam that still held the horseshoe and quickly tied a noose at the end. Bonswift, still struggling to breathe, lay on the table, rubbing his crushed throat with one hand and gesticulating desperately with the other.
Did I remember the law correctly?
Drakanen asked.
First the noose, then 3 freshly made javelins? Or maybe... No, too much ceremony. We'll do it differently. I need a punching bag. Let's see what I can make out of you with the powers of the charm spot.
It wasn't me who did it.
Bonswift rasped.
It was Bonswift.
You son of a...
Vuko began, raising his hand. He didn't manage to finish. Glifnak barreled into them like a furry locomotive. Drakanen was knocked onto his back, overturning the table. Winded, he kicked his legs forward and sprang back to his feet.
No!
The Yeti mumbled.
Don't hurt Dad. Don't hurt Dad.
That's your father?
The scout asked, bewildered. A cold draught, like one from a cave, swept through. The doors at the back of the room creaked open suddenly, and the gust smoothed the flames in the hearth and rattled the hanging totems.
It is time.
Came a strange voice from all directions, echoing softly as though the mountain itself spoke. It wasn't loud, but reverberated under the limestone ceiling, like the murmur of an underground stream or the creaking of breaking rock.
It is time to meet.
The ajar doors revealed a dark corridor leading to an unknown destination. In the wrecked room, the bleeding Grendel cradled his battered father, who was massaging his grey-bristled throat and coughing with a terrible dry sound, as though everything inside him was breaking. The Yeti raised his damp hazel eyes to the scout, with a disturbing glimmer of intelligence lurking beneath.
If everyone here didn't act so mysteriously, there wouldn't be any unpleasant misunderstandings like this,
Drakanen declared in a conciliatory tone. He looked around the ruined room, searching for any intact lamp, and finally found a metal one. He shook it and heard the sloshing of oil inside. He lit the wick from a burning splinter in the hearth, drew his sword, and took a few deep breaths.
Of course you're not going to tell me what's in there, are you?
He asked, but no answer came. He examined the open door, then put down his sword and tried to remove the door from its hinges. He couldn't. He settled for tearing off the broken latch, hanging by one end on a chain, and hacked it into pieces with an axe.
Locking those doors while I'm inside is pointless. For example, bracing them with a bench or something like that.
He said clearly.
I'll open them anyway, and then I'll be very unpleasant. Very. Did I make myself clear?
He took the silence as affirmation. He grabbed the flint and shook the lamp again, making sure the oil wouldn't run out soon.
What else?
He mumbled.
Chalk? A ball of string? Getting cautious, aren't I?
The corridor turned out to be a natural crack in the rock, no wider than a meter, sloping gently downward. The stones beneath his feet were smooth and damp, the only sign of human activity being the carefully sawn-off stalactites. This had been done a long time ago, as new, rusty-coloured drip formations, several centimetres long, had already appeared on the stumps.
The formations you see on the ceiling are called stalactites. Those rising from the ground are stalagmites, and the ones that have joined together are stalagnates.
He muttered in a know-it-all tone, raising the lamp. The corridor was winding, and after a few steps, the faint light from the room behind was gone, leaving only velvety, impenetrable darkness, broken only by the flickering flame casting shadows and glimmers on the wet, mineral-coated walls, but illuminating very little.
I don't like this.
Sifril muttered.
Feels like trap.
That's the job, my little Tinkerbell.
Drakanen growled.
I can't achieve anything by standing still or playing it safe. Sometimes you have to march straight into the dragon's jaws if we want to shake things up.
He squeezed through a narrow gap between the rocks and suddenly stopped in his tracks.
I think I've done it,
he whispered, cautiously raising his hand. The invisible diamond-like aura surrounding his body glowed with a warm, greenish light around his hand.
Cool,
he said happily.
Wizards always do this in movies. Except instead of seeing better, I'm actually more visible myself. Nekide you dupe, and it's blinding me.
He focused, and the greenish glow gradually dimmed. But a few meters ahead, another light appeared, this time not emanating from the scout. It flared up somewhere around the bend with a dim, flickering glow. Vuko carefully set his lantern down in a spot where no water dripped from the ceiling and reversed the sword in his hand, holding the blade downward. From that point on, he moved silently, placing each step with caution. He was bent low and tense like a coiled spring, one hand extended forward and the blade hidden behind his tilted shoulder. The cave was small, almost round, maybe 6 meters in diameter, with a high ceiling bristling with stalactites that looked like narwhal teeth. It was lit by a circle of oil lamps placed against the walls. And right across from the entrance stood Van Dyken. Tall, in his long black coat, his hair slicked back. He stood there, smiling mockingly. Drakanen struck like a cobra, slashing a diagonal cross through the air. The first cut aimed for the left artery, the second horizontally across the belly. No hesitation. The sword hit hard, as if against stone, with 2 sharp clangs echoing off the ceiling, and Van Dyken disappeared. Somewhere, as if from underground, a laugh echoed. Not the monumental operatic cackle of a villain, but a simple, malicious chuckle. The blade held up, with only 2 small nicks, but the shock of the impact sent a painful jolt through Drakanen's hand, radiating up to his elbow. He became aware of his magical aura, felt it, a tingling sensation on his skin like standing near a powerful magnetic coil. He then commanded the mist to gather, to start swirling like a nebula. He acted blindly, instinctively. He thought of an icy gust of wind, the movement of molecules, of a storm. Then he waved his hand, and all the lamps went out. Darkness fell on the cave like black water. Everything vanished. In the damp, cold air, the smell of scorched wicks and oil rose. An impenetrable velvety darkness. Total darkness. He remembered where the rocks and stalagmites were. He slipped silently, like a cat, to the other side of the cave and positioned himself with solid rock at his back. There were 2 dark spots behind him, patches of shadow where he hadn't had time to see anything. They could have been simple recesses or the openings of more tunnels. Above, another such spot, a dark crack that might have been a chimney leading to other caves or even outside, to the top of the mountain. He stood carefully, not making the slightest sound, breathing in slowly through his nose and sniffing. He tried to recall Van Dyken's scent, his unique signature of esters and organic acids, a scent that was one of a kind, but without assistance, it wasn't easy. He couldn't smell anything, only the foreign scent of mildewing rags and spoiled cheese. He focused on the air currents. There was a faint draft from above, likely from the chimney, and a slight breeze coming from one of the presumed corridors. The air there was damp, filled with water vapor, and something else. Something heavy, mineral chemical, reminiscent of something burning. Methane, in trace amounts. He stood there, weighing the sword in his hand, waiting for a sound. The rustle of clothes, a breath, the beating of a heart, a sigh, the creak of joints, or the scrape of a stone disturbed in the darkness. Nothing. The darkness carried only a very distant faint sound of water, closer, a soft splash, and nearer still, the occasional melodic drip of tiny droplets falling from the ceiling. If he had access to his enhancement, he would have been able to hear a spider crawling over the stones. He waited. He imagined the methane molecules, trace amounts mixed with the air. A carbon atom symmetrically surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms, like the skeleton of a pyramid. A tetrahedron. He felt them with his entire being. He pictured commanding these molecules to come together like droplets of mercury, obedient to his will, rushing through the tunnels, seeping from the rocks, flowing out from the coal deposits beneath the mountain, and racing toward the cave where he stood, concentrating into a small cloud. He had no idea if it was working. He was improvising, but he kept feeling that tingling sensation on his skin, especially along his hands. Something was happening. He also felt, though it could have been his imagination, that the bitter smell of hydrocarbons was growing stronger, almost noticeable. He thought that maybe he was regaining part of his lost enhancement. Wasn't methane supposed to be odorless to a normal person? He imagined splitting the cloud of gas into 3 parts, forcing 2 of them into the branches of the tunnels, while the third gathered under the ceiling. He pictured them mixing thoroughly with the air. Then he envisioned a spark. He felt it, forced it into existence. A sudden surge of vibrating electrons, faster and faster, until free charges ripped from their orbits, forming for a fleeting moment a cloud charged with energy. A supernova explosion for the microscopic cosmos of atoms. Nothing. He only felt the hairs on his entire body standing on end, as the cloud of diamond dust swirled around him like a mad whirlwind.
Pala huora lamita.
The electrostatic charges on his skin reached critical levels, and Drakanen shot sparks in all directions. There was a terrifying bang, and 3 blue flashes, like the light of a welder's torch, flooded the cave. A patch of fire spread across the ceiling. The roar of the explosion shook the mountain, echoed through distant tunnels, and trembled the caverns. Drakanen thought, carried by that violent fraction of a second, that if Van Dyken hadn't hidden in one of the tunnels or the chimney, he might have become invisible. Maybe he could cloak himself with some kind of optical camouflage, and was still standing calmly where he had been before, right in the middle of the cave. He managed to turn the fire streaking through the tunnels back, putting up barriers of solidified air and pushing it in the opposite direction. The flames roared again, burning off the remaining methane, with 3 bluish tongues flicking inward this time. They lashed the inside of the cave, surged with heat, and then died. But now, in the middle of the cave, stood a burning man, a motionless torch, engulfed in roaring flames, with arms outstretched like a figure of the Ku Klux Klan, like an angel carrying light, with feathers made of fire. Van Dyken was burning, but as if it didn't concern him, as if the fire wasn't blistering his skin, wasn't boiling his eyes or crackling his melting hair. He didn't scream, didn't thrash around. He just stood there burning like a hellish scarecrow for a split second. In the next moment, all the fire rushed toward Drakanen's face like a crashing wave. Before he hit the ground, screaming amidst the devouring flames, rolling over the damp cave floor, he had one more thought. Before he became a howling human torch, sizzling in the heat, with crackling skin, boiling eyes, and the fat in his body melting, he had time to think that the Van Dyken standing in the middle of the cave had eyes filled with violet, like 2 polished carbuncles. Shimmering beetles filling his eyelids, not the fish-like eyes of a man. He had the eyes of a native. And then the fire went out. Suddenly and all at once, darkness fell, and then all the lamps relit. They flickered back to life with a quiet puff and filled the cave with warm light. In the center of the room was a stone disc, black and smooth like a polished obsidian tabletop. The disc was slowly rotating, hovering a few centimeters above the cave floor. On the rotating stone sat a naked old man, cross-legged. He was grotesquely skinny, ugly, with pale, mottled skin and patches of hair clinging to his wrinkled skull. He sat there, turning like the eerie centerpiece of a macabre carousel, revealing his ape-like, frog-like face every so often, with eyes that looked overgrown. Drakanen picked himself up from the ground and checked his body. To his surprise, his eyebrows and eyelashes had partially survived, though the fuzz that had begun growing back after his emergence from the tree was now gone, and so was his 3-day stubble. It occurred to him that he must have shielded his eyes with his arm, but his skin bore no signs of serious burns, just a few stinging red patches, and that was all. He felt a warm, iron-salty trickle on his lip, and then he collapsed to his knees. His muscles trembled from the effort. It occurred to him that this whole insane confrontation had lasted no more than 3 seconds. He propped himself up with one hand, trying not to faint. He shook himself off like a stunned boxer, spat out blood-tinged saliva, and wiped his face.
You would have died.
A creaky, stone-like voice echoed. The old man did not open his mouth or move. The voice came from everywhere.
You're quick, but you wouldn't stand a chance against a true knower. Your songs are clumsy.
I only started this morning.
Drakanen grumbled, trying to stand while clinging to the wall.
Are you Bonswiff? Both bears? And who's that other guy?
He doesn't matter. I don't remember his name. Maybe it's Hodwill kicking the stone, or was that the previous one? There's always some fool who thinks that all it takes is to occupy the abandoned hut by the moaning mountain and pretend to be a great doer. He's useful to me. I don't eat, not for a long time, but someone has to wash me and apply the incense. I still need to drink. Someone has to sing to me. Someone has to calm the moaning mountain's sadness until I become mist, until I reach enlightenment, until I abstain from doing and acting and leave as a pure mind, unattached to will.
You turned his son into a monster.
Drakanen noted dryly.
Ah, yes, I figured a knifling would make a better servant. At least it scares off visitors. But that man came looking for his wife, so I kept them both. When I reach enlightenment, they will be free. If they live that long, it's been so long. I am still not a dreamer. The human flame woke me. Hatrun, the lady of wrath and passion, she ordered me to help you. So I am.
Ah,
Said Vuko grimly.
you're helping me.
Yes, I showed you the way. I gave you the power of the charm spot. But you are dull and clumsy. You enter the depths of the mountain. You see the image of your worst enemy, and what do? You reach for your sword. He is powerful. Do you think you'll kill him with iron?
You know him?
I've heard of him. I can sense what he does with the gods' songs. I see him through your eyes. He's crazy, but powerful. If you don't stop him, the end will come.
Yes, I know. The War of the Gods.
The scout grumbled.
That's possible. Even if the gods don't turn against each other, the balance will crumble. They might declare the next rebirth of the world. The dead snow will come.
I'm getting tired of these code names.
Drakanen squinted.
Can someone just say something straightforward? For once? In general, snow is basically dead. It's just frozen water. Is it such a big deal that snow falls?
What's this cod's name? Doesn't matter. This is different snow. It covers the world like winter, but it's a different winter. It signifies the end and the beginning. The whole world falls asleep, animals and people. The dead snow takes away their memory. When they wake, it's a new world. They don't remember their names or the faces of loved ones. They don't know who they are or where they came from. They don't know their friends or the way home. Nothing. Only what is in the song of the men. The simplest rules, how to plough a field or forge a sword. The simplest things. They have to learn everything from the beginning. Sometimes they wake up in completely different places than where the dead snow found them. Some even have to relearn how to speak and walk, as if they were children again. Some never wake up at all.
How wonderful.
Drakanen remarked.
How often does this happen?
No one knows. Those who woke up at the beginning of the world remember nothing. Even we, the knowers, can only say that it happens, sometimes every 100 years, sometimes every 1,000. When the world loses balance, when too many changes happen, when time slips from its tracks, usually because too many people have carelessly reached for the gods' songs, and sometimes the world changes too much just because of people. When there are too many wars, too many new ideas, too many strange things that destroy balance.
How do you recognize this dead snow?
Fog and darkness come. It can happen in spring or summer, as if the sun died. Trees suddenly lose their leaves and everything falls asleep. And the dead snow, they say, isn't cold. It's like ash. But none of this will help you. You can't escape the dead snow. Even the knowers fall asleep. Some of them remember something afterward, or so they say. It doesn't matter. This is knowledge that will be of no use to you. Listen to what I have to say, because I'm getting tired. Soon I'll sleep. I haven't spoken so much or stayed in this world with my mind for so long. So listen to the truth. You cannot carry the power of the charm spot in yourself for too long. Whatever you try to do with it, you will have less and less with each use. The second truth is that sooner or later you'll have to return to the charm spot and draw power again. Some try to gather it in reserve. If you pick a mushroom growing on the charm spot, take some soil, release the plant's pollen, or collect snow, there will always be a bit of the song of the gods in it. But such a thing is dangerous, and that is the third truth. One who does not know how to sing may unleash a destructive force with a single careless thought. You could release it yourself in your sleep or in anger. If you carry such a reserve, you must hide and lock it. No one can touch or open it. The fourth truth is that you can also summon the gods' songs to come to you, creating a phantom, the awakened. In such a form, the god's song can come to you, but remember that the awakened has its own life and is like a beast. And the fifth truth, it's a lie that the god's song won't listen to anyone. It will, but you have to know how to ask. If you are thirsty, you must ask for a wooden cup of water no larger than a quart, and that water must be pure. If you just say water, the song will send a waterfall upon you or cast you into the sea. You must feel the songs and sing in a way that they can understand you. The sixth and final truth is that even if the song understands you, it will always do things the simplest way. If you want the god's song to light a campfire for you and say nothing more, it will likely strike it with lightning. You must remember every thought and feeling with which you do something. Then you must create a special song from that and lock it in one sentence or word, one that no one else knows but you. Then you'll say the word and remember the whole song. What you desire will happen again. Remember what I've said, and it will serve you well if you understand. Now leave. I no longer have the strength to look at this world. When you leave, tell that.
Then the old man falls silent. The oil lamps dim slightly, but continue to burn. I wait for a while, hoping he might speak again, but the vibrating voice of the mountain is quiet. The old man sits motionless, the round, polished disc still spinning slowly, like a roulette wheel coming to a stop. I find my sword, examine the nicked blade, and slide it into its scabbard. Around the bend, I bend down to retrieve my lamp, which I light normally with flint and a bit of tinder. The way back feels longer, but I am tired and hungry, just as I was after hyperadrenaline. I have to sit down 2 times on the damp rocks to rest. The room has been somewhat restored. Scattered items have been picked up. The table stands on its legs again, and the host has taken up his usual spot on the stool by the hearth. He's found another jug to replace the broken one and refilled it with beer. He sits now, looking at me cautiously over the rim of his mug. I fish out a silver mark from my belt and place it in front of him on the table. His dog-like eyes gaze at me, filled with apprehension. "You taught me well," I explain. "So, you've earned those 2 gwitchs. For this mark, I want some supplies. Bread, cheese, dried meat, some beer for my flask, and a small pot. I have to leave here immediately." He stares at me, unmoving, as if he doesn't understand anything. Finally, he reaches for the coin, turns it over in his fingers, and gestures toward the pantry. I take it as an invitation to help myself. I rummage through the storehouse for a while and find everything I might need. The mage watches me indifferently and doesn't protest, even when I show him a flask of a hellishly sweet drink that smells like a mix of persimmon and dates. I also find something resembling a primitive backpack, basically a fur bag with sewn-on straps. I pack my belongings into it. I pause halfway to the door, feeling a bit sheepish, though I don't know why. What's your name? I ask at last.
Lenfi chasing the magpie.
Thank you, Lenfi. If I somehow manage to prevent the worst times from coming, it will be thanks to you. I'll kill the doers, or take them with me. He's silent for a moment, then glances toward the underground doors.
Did you kill him?
He asks with hope. I shake my head, ashamed. I feel foolish. I couldn't. He's too powerful, even in his sleep. He appeared to me as my enemy, and I couldn't defeat him, neither with the sword nor with the god's song.
Then why do you think you'll be able to kill the others?
I strap the quiver to my backpack and put on my cloak. Silently, I heave the heavy bundle onto my back.
What's your name?
Ulf Knight Wanderer, I reply.
Find your way, Ulf.
It's about time. I'm going. I think soon, you and your son will be free. He slowly shakes his head and takes a drink. Then he just sits there, playing with the strap under the table, the same strap that once held the horseshoe.
He'll never enter among the gods. While you were inside, I thought about taking my son and leaving. Then he would have kept you for himself. But then the door shut, even though it was broken open. He has other plans, but still I think we'll be free soon.
I leave and close the door quietly behind me. It's a misty day, the air pierced by the shrill cry of a hunting falcon. I return to the path, passing the palisade of menhirs, and step into the forest without looking back. I don't go far because I collapse from exhaustion. I find a well-sheltered spot and, with trembling hands, untie the straps of my pack. Then I devour a piece of bread, some smoked cheese, and something resembling sausage. I don't bother cutting pieces, just tear them off with my teeth like an animal. Beer runs down my chin, and I barely remember to chew what's in my mouth. Afterward, I don't even have the strength to clean up the leftovers. I just crawl under the fronds of a feathery fern and wrap myself in my cloak, slipping into a sleep that feels more like a trance. Those are the moments I like the most, when I'm simply walking. The march gives me a rare sense of freedom I seldom found on Earth. There's something primal in it, something that inhabits the ancient parts of the brain, meant for instincts from long before the age of regulations, protective protocols, and controlling institutions. Here is a man walking forward. He goes where he pleases, sleeps where the night catches him. Life narrows down to the present, and planning becomes limited to the span of a single day. You have to survive the night, know what you'll eat tomorrow, and where you'll go next. Everything beyond that is abstract and holds little practical value. So I walk, through the virgin forest covering the mountains. I avoid well-trodden paths, sticking to narrow trails, sometimes likely used by animals, or follow mountain streams where I can walk along the gravel banks or hop across stones. At times I bushwhack through the woods. I have a goal. I want to return to the land of fire. I have friends there. I have a horse and my gear. Winter is coming. There will be time spent by the fireplace in young Atleaf's manor or in Grunaldi's fortress. Time for planning, for scheming, for gathering strength. Because now I must transform into an assassin, a killer in the shadows. I keep walking. All the while a dark shadow lingers in my soul. I can't forget the wretched mage left in that mushroom-like hut, with his monster of a son. I can't forget the dried-up mummy sitting on the spinning stone. My ally, my teacher and advisor. No one else here has ever told me as many useful things as he did. I can't forgive myself for not killing him. He was evil, probably just as evil as Van Dyken. The only difference was that he tried to refrain from the actions that Van Dyken reveled in. I repeat it to myself again. Evil. I found myself in a world where oppressive, judgmental, and almost prehistoric categories like that actually matter. Back where I come from, not long ago, one could end up in court for using such a public judgment. Here, however, these concepts are entirely natural, almost technical. Evil. Good. Just like that. Here, you can't check the box for I don't know or no opinion. This world has two edges, like Hatron's spear. Life and death. Evil and good. cowardice, and nobility. There is no, I don't know. There's no time for that. You choose either the handle or the blade. There's no moral relativism. Handle in your hand or blade in your gut. No room for Pontius Pilates. Here, decisions are made in a split second and are final. You can wash your hands later, in blood. That's why I can't forgive myself for not killing him. True, I probably wouldn't have managed it. But I didn't even try. I hid behind my mission, my most sacred mission, with its abstract rules concocted under a sun that here doesn't even deserve to be considered an astronomical phenomenon, a nameless spark in the dust of the stars. I hid behind the rules like a coward, rules that don't belong to this world. Rules of hypocrites, for whom the stick has 10 ends and everything is relative, so any decisive action is a crime. It means we start making distinctions, start using absolutist concepts, and from there, it's only a step to passing moral judgments. And we all know where that ends, the Inquisition. So, it's better to turn away. Better not to see the evil. I turned my back and walked away, because it wasn't part of the mission. I didn't have to confront him directly. A spell is like a program. All I had to do was finish the command sequence differently, the one that had drawn the methane into the chamber. Let it keep working. Let it collect gas under the ceiling until it reached the right concentration and sank down to the burning lamps on the floor. That's how it should work. I'm starting to learn. Starting to think like an assassin. I have to learn to use the law I have somewhere inside me. Let's say it's in my heart. And confront it with an even more medieval control system. My conscience. Which apparently has gone mad because it won't let me rest over the fact that I didn't kill a man. Still, I have to trust it because there's nothing else here. I only remember the general direction I'm supposed to head in, a side of the world. Unfortunately, I'm taking a different path than the one I came by to the land of snakes. A roundabout way, you could say. And I'm supposed to find a small keep nestled between a forest and a lake. A point in the middle of wild mountains. I could manage if only I could look at any map. For just 2 minutes. But there are no maps. For now, I have to rely on instinct. By dusk, I stop. I build a decent shelter from poles tied with leather straps, covered with a thick thatch of pine branches. I light a miniature fire, sheltered by stones, and cook a soup from some tubers smelling like wild garlic, edible roots hiding beneath ferns, a piece of dried salted meat, and some bread. I sparingly fill my pipe and drink hot water sweetened with syrupy wine. I look at the water, a mountain stream splashing over rocks. I wish I knew if it was a tributary of the Dragorina, but sadly, it isn't labeled. I'm in a hurry. I'm haunted by the feeling that something bad has happened, that it might be already too late. I dream of a group of ghostly musicians, a hellish band sitting on barrels and stools set out in a clearing, playing bizarre, noisy music. A skinny flutist with a face like a rat's skull, a bloated, humanoid toad-like creature covered in purple boils playing the bagpipes, and a lobster man in a spiked scarlet shell cranking a hurdy-gurdy, or some sort of theorbo. The music is loud and shrill, almost drowning out the terrifying roar of a fire. Wooden huts are burning, roofs collapsing in a shower of sparks, flames licking the black sky. Along the palisade, black, twisted bundles hang from chains driven into the beams. Some are still burning, all are smoking, resembling charred and shriveled mannequins.
Anyone else want to dance the fire dance?
Shouts a skinny man standing under a banner pole driven into the ground. Snakes are coiled around the shaft, with a skull and 2 horsetails atop it. A handful of people kneel on the ground in front of the village, their hands tied behind their backs. They kneel in silence, while behind them, huts collapse in the crash of timber, but they only watch the ghastly band.
Those who bowed to the snake will come with us, safe and sound, just like I said.
The man's voice alternates between a booming bass and a screeching tenor. Puberty. It's a kid, a teenager, his body covered in zigzagging tattoos. Around him, dozens of snake people are milling about. Big men in elaborate segmented half-armors and helms, while nearby the fire paints flickering reflections on the armor of a few crabs. Why do they listen to such a whelp?
I asked if anyone here wants to keep bowing to the fire god, Or maybe someone wants to challenge the viper's sting.
They stay silent, watching the band.
You!
The boy yells.
You were fighting. I saw you. Bring him here.
Two massive warriors drag a struggling man out of the crowd and throw him into the middle of the clearing, right in front of the musicians. He lifts his face, staring at the warty toad's maw, the rat's skull, and the spindle-shaped lobster head. He looks like someone who wants to wake up. He shakes his head, wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth.
Give him a sword,
shouts the boy. One of the snake people hands the kneeling man a short cleaver. He reaches out and grips the wooden handle, then closes his eyes for a moment. Slowly, he rises from his knees, weighing the blade in his hand. It doesn't last long. There are two sharp swishes, the crunch of sliced flesh, and a muffled scream. For a split second, the light of the fire reveals a violent spray of blood. The man collapses to the ground like a sack, his head rolling across the blood-splattered grass.
It's over,
the boy screams.
Now comes the time of the snakes. Go to the snake. Go to Castle Thorn. There, the prophet will show you the way.
They leave. Silently, they line up one behind the other and file into the darkness. They pass the lifeless body without a glance. No sobs, no wails. No one escorts or leads them. Only the roar of the fire can be heard, and the music, which begins to play again. The nightmare wakes me in the pale, gray pre-dawn, amidst drizzle and the cawing of crows. I sit there, wrapped in my damp cloak, watching through the opening of my shelter as the mist clings to the stream and wet leaves, which are already beginning to turn yellow. I should try to get some more sleep, but I don't want to. I'm afraid to fall asleep. I'm afraid the nightmare I saw is happening for real. I'm infected by the power of the charm spot. Such side effects are to be expected. I'm going on azimuth again, quickly and without complaining, even though this method is not really the preferred one. In the mountains, going cross-country usually doesn't pay off. I come across them around noon, on a trail cutting across the mountainside. First, I hear footsteps. The scuffing of soles, the rustling as one of them trips over stones without a word of complaint or groan of pain. Then, the strange rhythmic mumbling from many throats. By then, I'm already lying in thick bushes, covered with dry grass and branches, surrounded by a cloud of irritated mosquitoes. I'm hiding a few meters from the path, so I can watch as they pass by. People of fire, or perhaps another tribe. In any case, not snakes. They go single file, one after another, stumbling and dragging their feet, each with a hand on the shoulder of the one in front. They walk, humming a monotonous wild tune. It seems oddly familiar until I suddenly remember. They're humming the same chant that the ghostly musicians played in my dream. I lie perfectly still and wait for them to pass. 38 of them. Men, women, of different ages. Each one keeps their hand on the shoulder of the person in front and shuffles forward like a parade of zombies, heading toward the place I just came from. And all of them have their eyes clouded over with a strange, faintly golden haze. I start finding settlements in the afternoon. First, the ruins of war. Heaps of charred beams, blackened remains of stone foundations, rows of corpses in various stages of decay, swarms of flies, the cawing of crows. The sickening stench of burning and rot. It doesn't look like the settlement from my dream, but it still leaves a grim impression. In each one, I find traces of ghastly executions, charred, twisted bodies chained to palisades or posts with 2-meter-long chains. I saw this in my dream. These people worshipped fire, worshipped the blacksmith god, produced dragon oil, something between napalm and Greek fire, and danced the fire dance. That's why snakes burn them alive. They make them dance in the flames. Typical invader humor. I also come across a settlement, completely deserted, though without any sign of destruction. At first, I sit in the bushes, watching. There's total silence. No smoke rising from the roofs, no clucking of chickens, no barking of dogs, no lowing of cattle. Nothing. I sit there for half an hour, well camouflaged and motionless. Everything among the huts is completely still. A light rain begins to fall, and leaves drift down from the trees. I slip behind the low palisade, which is more like a leaning fence made of sharpened stakes, and cautiously move along the walls. There's no sign of a fight, no bodies, no blood. It's as if everyone has been swept away. Men, women, elders, children, cattle, pigs, goats, and dogs. Not even birds fly over the village. There are no flies or ants to be seen. Instinctively, I activate Sifril. She appears in a burst of rainbow sparks, the fairy-like nymph with golden hair.
You used up
I'm
almost
starting to get
everything
used to her.
she said.
in that cave.
Kneeling under the cottage, Drakainen glanced quickly at himself.
True. I can't see that glow now. And I don't feel the tingling either.
He muttered under his breath.
Tough luck. We're going in.
The door to the nearest hut wasn't locked. He pushed it open slightly with the blade, then slipped inside along the wall, still keeping his back covered. For a long moment, there was silence. Drakainen circled the large room, sword at the ready, moving his feet in a combat stance, like some strange sliding dance. He checked every nook and cranny and every door. Then he straightened up, muttered "clear," and struck a fire. The flame from the oil lamp cast a glow on the beamed walls, the neatly made wooden beds in alcoves covered with fur, and the long table set for a meal. An abundant meal for a dozen or so people. 2 whole roasted carcasses on wooden platters, flat, round loaves of bread, bundles of pale pink shoots resembling sweet flag, and some pickled vegetables floating in brine in clay bowls. The roast was cold, the foam had settled in the pitchers, and the bread was slightly dried on top, but nothing was spoiled. It all smelled quite appetizing. Drakainen knelt by the hearth and rubbed a pinch of ash between his fingers.
It looks like it happened just yesterday,
He said.
They sat down for dinner. A fancy dinner in a wealthy homestead. Everything is spotless. The table set with clean plates and decent knives, roasted boars or maybe some tapirs, furs around the hearth like a museum. A few managed to carve slices from the roast. Someone broke the bread. Someone poured beer. And that's it. No one drank a sip. No one took a bite. They calmly stood up and left, taking the cattle and livestock, along with the flies and bees. Or perhaps they were very gently, and without any violence, abducted by aliens. What am I saying? Here I am, the alien.
He stood up.
This is practically begging me to help myself, begging for us to stay the night. Weapons on the walls, water in the well, firewood, clean beds. Perfect. And that's why I don't like it at all. We're leaving, Sifril. Through the bathhouse. Don't touch anything. We're not taking a single nail.
As much as he had learned about the layout of these huts, almost identical, as if offered by the same development company, there should be a second rear exit near the bathhouse, leading to a courtyard enclosed by farm buildings. He found it and silently slipped outside. He glanced into the barn and stable, but met no one. Nor did he see any livestock, a brown buffalo with massive horns or a ghastly pig resembling a miniature hippopotamus. Not a fly, not a spider. Nothing. There was a dead silence. Only the wind rustled through the trees, and a nearby stream gurgled. Vuko slipped out through the sturdy wooden gate in the corner of the yard and wandered between the huts, all just as deserted and quiet as the one he had explored. Bright autumn leaves, like tropical butterflies, swirled in the air.
Anyone would stop here.
Vuko remarked.
The place is beautiful and abandoned. Just move in. Even the view is fantastic, and it could be defended easily, although a better palisade would help.
Do you see that glow anywhere?
Asked Sifril.
That magical tingling? No, not a trace. But that doesn't mean much. I think people stop here. Anyone traveling this path or wandering into this valley, hunters, refugees, shepherds.
So why isn't anyone here?
Good question. Do you really want to know? Because I don't.
He circled the entire settlement, moving cautiously as if expecting snipers or mines. Nothing happened. And then he turned around and ran straight into a crab. It stood motionless in the middle of the narrow street between the huts, like a grotesque statue. Standing there, it stared straight at Drakainen through the narrow slit of his helmet, like through a visor of a frog-mouth tournament helm. His arms were crossed nonchalantly under his armpits, blades hidden. The plates of his armor, jagged like the scales of a deep-sea fish, rose and fell lightly in a rhythmic motion. The scout slowly unclipped the straps of his backpack and placed it on the ground.
I know that inside you're still a child.
He whispered.
Or rather, you were. Now you're a monster. So if I have to, I'll kill you. I just want to pass.
He extended one leg, evenly distributing his weight, placed the flat of his blade along his forearm, and relaxed all his muscles, focusing on his breathing.
Maybe we can go around him?
Sifril suggested nervously.
Not likely,
Vuko replied.
He's clearly not waiting for a bus. He's deliberately blocking the way to the gate.
The crab made a strange rustling sound but still didn't move.
Is that why the others disappeared?
No.
Vuko replied.
People who run into them look like they've been through a fan, and there's no blood here anywhere. The problem is, I'm not as fast as I used to be. How much of it is left?
Of what?
That magical glow, the aura, the Pichkumateri. Is there anything left or not? He started moving. Time's out. You're the operating system, remember?
Just remnants, scattered. If you were to gather it all, you might be able to powder your nose.
On the left hand.
It was like the shimmer of hot air over a burner, a cloud the size of an egg that refracted light, with tiny sparks twinkling within it, like diamond dust. The crab clattered and shifted its weight from one leg to the other. Its triple claws scraped against the stones of the yard.
Sifril, fly over to him. I want to know what's visible between those plates when they bristle.
Have you gone mad? I'm not going anywhere near him.
You're in my head. Besides, he can't even see you. No one can, Pichku Materinu. Only me. Get going, and then don't talk back to me. I'm trying to focus.
On what?
Just go.
She pouted and flew off, carefully making a wide arc to approach the crab from behind. Drakainen muttered under his breath, eyes half closed, fixated on the shimmering glow above his hand. Suddenly, a nasty screech of metal rang out, and the crab unexpectedly raised its torso and uncrossed its arms, revealing two crescent-shaped blades. Vuko, still muttering something stubbornly in Finnish, sidestepped with small steps toward the wall where a porch was supported by thick pillars. The crab chirped, sounding exactly like a cricket, then began advancing toward him. Drakainen took a few quicker steps, still maintaining his odd crouched fencing stance, repeating his words like a relentless prayer. He was speaking louder now, and a note of hysteria crept into his voice. The crab extended both blades forward and charged abruptly, like an enraged boar.
Apiainen! Perkele Apiainen!
The scout roared, pressing his back against the pillar. At the last moment he spun behind the column. The blades whirred like helicopter rotors, thudding against the wood like a burst from a machine gun, sending thick, curled shavings flying from the pillar. Drakainen dropped to the ground and slashed at the creature's legs, then immediately leaped back like a torero, leaning against another pillar. The air was torn by a terrifying, high-pitched screech, like the shriek of steam from an exploding riverboat, and the squeal of a pig, played in reverse. At the same time, Sifril let out a high-pitched scream. Drakainen glanced at his hand, but the shimmering aura was completely gone. There was no visible effect left.
Damn,
he muttered.
Nobody said it would be easy. What do you see?
He yelled desperately.
What's underneath?
Tissue.
Sifril said hesitantly.
Pale and slick like a mollusk's. Soft. But it only shows for a moment.
The crab freed its blade, which had been lodged deep into the wood of the pillar, and charged at Drakainen again. The sabers blurred through the air like propeller blades, creating a shimmering steel halo around it. Jaffe deflected 3 strikes before he was shredded like a duck in a threshing machine, Drakainen thought. Tough old Jaffe, fast as hell. I'm much bigger and heavier. Can I parry even one? And then he stopped thinking. He became pure movement, letting his training take over, ingrained in his reflexes. The wooden pillar seemed to be a problem for the crab, as it circled cautiously for a moment, trying to flank from one side or the other. The blades extended wide like a bull's horns, twitching slightly, ready to become a deadly rotor at any second. This time, Vuko went underneath. He made a nervous move in one direction, a simple feint, and the crab took the bait, its steel blades slicing through the air. Drakainen dove under the metal arms, leaped onto a barrel, pushed off the timbered wall with one foot, and somersaulted over the creature. He cushioned the landing with a roll, now standing in the middle of the courtyard, panting heavily in a massive cloud of dust.
The end,
He muttered.
I've run out of ideas.
The crab pivoted in place and moved toward him.
Vitun,
Drakainen said, nervously flipping the sword in his hand. And then a buzzing shape descended from above. A brown, elongated lump like a burnt cigar stub. It smacked into the dirt, but quickly shot back up in a crooked, zigzagging flight, like an insect half poisoned by pesticides. Vuko spun around and dashed in a frenzied sprint to the other side of the yard. The creature chased after him in strange leaps, its armored, barrel-shaped body swaying, but now a hornet was crawling across the spiked plates of its armor. The scout heard the whistle of steel behind him and felt the gust of air kicked up by the blades. He took a desperate triple jump, grabbing his sword with both hands, and vaulted onto the nearest roof, plunging the weapon into the thatch. He swiftly pulled himself up and tucked his legs in. The crab slammed into the wall, sending straw raining down on the yard. Drakainen climbed as high as he could and sat down, breathing heavily and wiping his forehead.
What now?
Sifral asked.
Are you just going to sit there?
you bet.
Vuko panted.
And next?
Pray.
Drakainen said seriously. They sat. The crab thrashed around the yard, slicing through anything in its path. Judging by the sounds, it seemed to have fixated on a wooden barrel.
And if it climbs up here?
Sifrol asked, valiantly suppressing a hint of hysteria.
With that build, never. Ever seen chickens climb walls?
A wild scream echoed from below. The crab suddenly started flailing wildly, crashing into the wall, then into a wheelbarrow that had been standing peacefully, chopping it to pieces.
What was that?
My hornet. I made a hornet. If it worked out, it's armed with the neurotoxin of crustaceans. I'm not sure if it worked. I didn't have time. I don't even know what it is. I wanted a wasp, and I got a hornet, and in some weird color.
You didn't create a living organism.
She said.
You're way too green for that. At best, you mutated something local. It works by taking the path of least resistance, remember?
Jabal to pass as long as it works.
The awful screeching in the courtyard grated on their ears. The unfortunate crab flailed around on its back, thrashing its limbs. A cloud of dust rose above its awkwardly spinning body. It went on for a long time, but eventually the noise died down. The creature lay almost still, only one limb twitching feebly. Drakainen slid off the roof despite Sifral's protests, approached his abandoned pack, and slung it over his back.
We're leaving.
He was already at the gate when he heard a sob from the direction of the creature lying on the ground, followed by a clear moan. It wasn't the screech of a malfunctioning compressor, but the weeping of a child, muffled by the steel shell of a frog-mouth helmet.
Perkala Satani Vitu.
Drakainen growled.
No, please.
Sifral begged.
Zashto yasem takavi glupan.
He muttered through gritted teeth.
Glupshi ko turski kurach.
He turned back and approached the creature on the ground. Picking up a broken shaft that had turned into a useless pole, he prodded it firmly at the end. A weak squeak was his response. Drakainen pried the creature's body over, flipping the crab onto its back. He waited a moment, but nothing happened. He stepped closer and cautiously poked the body with the tip of his sword. One of the limbs weakly scratched at the ground, but that was it. Cursing furiously in finish, Vuko found where the armor plates connected, slid the blade flat under the edge, and began prying. The metal screeched. Drakainen gritted his teeth and groaned with effort. The first rivet snapped with a sharp crack, curling its head, and the next one came loose more easily. The third barely held at all. The scout spread the armor plates apart, partially bending them outward. An awful, sickly sweet stench burst out. Vuko leapt back a few steps, coughing. The inside of the armor was filled with oval patches of snail-like slime-covered tissue, wrapping around the pale, trembling body curled within. At the back of the shell-like covering, a massive purple swelling spread out in all directions like an octopus stuck to the interior. Fighting back nausea, the scout spat thick saliva into the dust, rolled up his sleeves, and plunged his hands into the armor. He managed to slide his hands under the slimy mantle of rubbery tissue and feel human skin, but something was holding on. He pried the plates open wider and saw ribbed, translucent tubes forced into the mouth of the being, trapped inside and into every other body opening, with purple clusters of veins embedded under the skin along the spine. He pulled out his knife and again reached into the foreign tissue, carefully cutting to free the small human trapped inside. Twice he had to step aside to catch his breath, spitting several times to clear the thick saliva choking him and waiting for the spasms in his throat to subside. Finally, the snail-like muscles let go with a disgusting slurp. Drakainen grabbed the small body under the arms and pulled it free. The child trapped inside the crab was larger than he'd expected. A girl. Adolescent, maybe 13 years old. Hairless, covered in slime, with marks from the tentacles that had been embedded under her skin, swollen like sores. She was trembling violently, or maybe it was convulsions. He laid the girl on the ground and carefully touched her neck.
Pulse is steady,
he said.
Quick, but no arrhythmia.
He lifted her eyelids, but all he saw were enormous hazel irises filling the entire eyes. He cursed. He carried the child over to the well and washed her with several buckets of water, gently removing the last of the tubes embedded under her skin like purple leeches. The girl stopped trembling, suddenly sat up, and vomited a huge amount of slime. She choked for a while, then finally opened her eyes.
Water,
She groaned. Drakainen knelt and lifted the bucket for her to drink.
and now what?
Sifril asked in her relentlessly nagging tone.
Are you going to adopt her, or wait until she grows up?
I'll give her a cloak and let her go. I can't babysit her.
She'll just end up with the snakes, and they'll put her in another crab. What sense does it make?
I want to go to the snake.
The girl muttered.
Why is there no music? I'm so cold.
There you go. She wants to go to the snake.
Drakainen grumbled.
Vuko,
Sifril whispered.
No.
He said with a hint of fury in his voice.
Everything has its limits. I'm not doing that. I'm the one who decides here. I'm no saint, but I'm not a monster either. I didn't pull her out for this.
Vuko,
I'm a human being, and I'm going to stay one. Otherwise, I'll lose my mind, or turn into the same kind of beast as him.
Vuko, the village, the fog is coming.
Drakainen looked up at the houses. Something had changed. Dusk was falling, and cold fog began creeping out from between the buildings. It coiled like tentacles, and beneath it, near the ground, a rainbow-like glow shimmered, like diamond frost.
Run!
Drakainen shouted. He grabbed the girl by the arm, slung her over his shoulder, scooped up his pack on the run, and bolted into the forest. He ran until the village was far behind, until his strength
A small
finally
fire
depleted.
burns in the rock crevice, safely hidden from anyone's view. A triangular alcove in the wall, flanked by rocks on both sides, over which I built a roof of poles, covered with freshly cut juniper branches. I was able to carry her for about a kilometer. Almost a kilometer of cross-country running through a wild forest, with a whimpering 25-kilogram weight slung over my back. Then I dragged her through the wilderness. She can walk on her own, but it's hard to imagine a more troublesome companion. If I let her go, she runs. Not far, like a mouse. She finds any cover, a tree trunk, a rock, a fallen tree, and wedges herself into the tightest corner, curling up into a nervous ball. She whimpers and trembles the whole time. She's afraid of me, afraid of the trees, of the birds flying by. of the sky above her. I don't know if she'll ever recover. I can guess how this works. You take a terrified child, living in a world slowly turning into a slaughterhouse, and then turn them into a tank. An armored creature equipped with blades capable of slicing through anything that frightens them, covered in plates that neither sword nor arrow can pierce, containing inside a womb, a soft, warm, and moist environment that feeds, soothes, and lulls the mind, seeping in mysterious music. And now she's naked, a snail without a shell, defenseless. There's no music, no armor, she has to chew and swallow on her own. Pulled out of the shell like an oyster, exposed to the icy wind and burning sun. Scratched by stones and thorns. The world outside is cruel and threatening. It's much better to be a crab. A fearsome, armored creature, soft and warm on the inside. That gives a sense of security. I stare at the flickering flames and sip water mixed with wine. I fed her. By force. Prying her jaws open and pushing in small pieces of cheese and bread, pouring water down her throat. Just like feeding a wild, terrified animal. When I finally let her go, she thrashed for a while. But behind her was the slope, and on both sides the rock walls. Straight ahead, where the exit to freedom was, there was a terrifying fire, and a monstrous man sat by it. In the end, she crawled into the tightest corner, curling up into a ball, wrapped in my spare cloak. I look at this trembling bundle, hiding in the shadows, and I don't know what to do next. I have a strong urge to just leave her. Dragging the girl along, I won't be able to hide anywhere because she'll immediately give away our position. I won't escape, nor will I break through. In the end, I'll die, and she'll die with me. Calculation, weighing the odds, a pointless waste of time, just to confirm that somewhere inside I'm still rational. But why, when I can't leave her anyway? We humans are built like this. Aside from logic, reason, and the ability to weigh chances, we also have scruples, a conscience, emotions, various superstitions that make us human. That doesn't change the fact that I've gotten myself into a mess. I'll abandon her anyway. Well, not abandon. I'll let her go. She's neither my aunt nor my daughter, just a child of war. And I'm not a mechanized infantry regiment. Let her go to hell, but not in the heart of the mountains, practically behind enemy lines. I'll leave her when we reach a more civilized area, if any still exist. The cold wakes me at dawn, icy fog and dampness. And cawing, a large black bird sits on my pack, tugging at the strap with its beak.
Get lost.
It greets me with a hoarse, rude squawk, and nothing has made me this happy in a long time. Where have you been, Nevermore, you old scoundrel?
Trail.
The girl wakes up too. I'm sure she'll freak out at the sight of the raven, but she only peeks out from under the blanket, eyes wide like a deer, full of fascination.
Crab.
The raven says, worried. I know, brother, but what can you do?
Corpse.
No, we don't do that. It's bad, naughty, bad, negative bird.
You corrupts? Moron.
I take the pack from him. The raven jumps back, flapping its wings, and perches on a nearby rock. I pull out a piece of bread and a few strips of meat. I take my portion and offer it to the girl. She pouts and turns her face away. All right. It's food, understand? Good. Food. Food. She looks at me with a pitiful, wet gaze and wraps the cloak tighter around herself. I tear off a piece of meat and throw it to the raven. He cocks his head, blinking his beady eyes from one side, then the other, and finally swallows the bite.
Trary.
You've lost your mind, I say, but break off a piece of smoked goat cheese for him. I find my old clothes in the pack, pieces of my cloak cut into a kilt and tunic, and toss them to the girl. She pulls back a bit into the corner of the rock but does nothing more. I finish chewing, sitting filthy by the dead fire, a knife in hand. I'm stiff and frozen, and I don't think I've ever been this dirty. I cut pieces of meat or bread close to my mouth and eat them off the blade. From under the tangled cloak, a thin hand sneaks out, quickly snatches the food, and disappears. The clothes, however, don't trigger any sensible associations. I finish my hurried breakfast, then I reach for the scraps myself. First, I show them to her. From one side, then the other, putting them on and taking them off. I even dance for a moment, to show how warm and comfortable I feel. Then I take them off again.
You corpse. Freak.
The bird comments from its rock.
Ugly.
The girl suddenly declares,
I want my armor. I am a crab. You're stupid carrion. I devour those like you.
It ends with a scuffle. I am neither a wandering psychiatric ward nor a kindergarten teacher. In the end, she's dressed and sniffling, and I get a scratch on my arm. And no one here would even think of conducting an investigation. I gather my gear, stash the knife, hang the sword, throw on my backpack, and drape my cloak. Then, a routine jump in place to check if anything jingles. Laughable. Dragging along a war-crazed child at my side, I might as well jingle like a pan seller.
Trail?
Nevermore urges. To Grinaldi's home, I say. Do you remember where it is?
Trail?
So I move, after the raven. Now even that seems to me perfectly rational. At least I know where I'm going. I'm following the raven. The girl offers passive resistance, dragging herself or trying to run off somewhere. I try to talk to her, ask her name, sing some stupid songs. No effect. From time to time she has fits of fury, throwing herself at me, flailing both hands wherever she can. I block with my arm and wait until she tires. There are no crescent-shaped steel blades anymore. Just the frail arms of a skinny, growing girl. The raven perches on a rock or branch during these moments, watching me with a tilted head, and I think I detect a hint of mockery in its beady eye. We cover a few more kilometers like this, and when I start to recognize the surroundings, I stop holding on to the girl. Fine. I won't force her. As if to spite me, she follows. Keeping a few meters behind like a stubborn village dog, she retreats when I turn around, only to shuffle after me again. Whatever. If she comes to the camp, I'll feed her. If she runs, I won't chase her. Everything has its limits, including my foolish idealism. From that point on, we move faster. The raven stops whining. I walk at my usual pace, and the girl gradually lags behind. Yet, I still feel like I can see those skinny legs sticking out from the dull kilt that reaches past her knees, somewhere in the distance. Ridge, rocks, the murmur of a stream, the rain of colorful leaves, a parade of trees in the royal colors of autumn. The mountains surrounding me seem gentler and lower, and lakes are beginning to glimmer in the valleys below. At the first one, I sit on the shore and wash my face with crystal-clear water. I feel moved. The land of fire. Feels like I'm coming home. And I can distinctly feel the rising fear, because my adopted homeland is ablaze. At times, I pass burned-out huts, where only piles of charred beams and blackened foundations remain, and twisted, shrunken bodies chained in place. Bodies of people forced to dance in the flames. I look into those scorched faces, trying to recognize familiar features in the charred masks, but all I see are bared teeth, baked white, and I can't tell if it's someone I know or a stranger. Yet I approach every time on weak legs, with a billiard ball lodged in my throat. I can feel we're getting closer. We don't stop to rest. I eat a salty strip of hard, dried meat as I march, washing it down with water. Nevermore flutters ahead a bit, then circles back, and I figure he's keeping an eye out for enemies. I call him back with a short whistle. He swoops down and perches on a rock, eyeing me and tilting his head, though I can't tell if he's obedient or just curious. If there's a charm spot nearby, I whisper, lead me to it. I don't know what we're about to run into, and I need power. I need the songs of the gods, do you understand?
Kra.
He caws and flies off again. He finds the charm spot for me after half an hour of walking through the forest and rocks. A small clearing surrounded on three sides by swamp, bristling with limestone rocks as sharp as teeth, where a few twisted, gnarled trees stand, though all of them are dead. Just like the grass, shrubs, and herbs. Everything is lifeless. I focus and activate Sifril.
She shot out from behind his head, her iridescent wings shimmering, darting across the clearing in quick zigzags, pausing briefly near the bushes and rocks like a butterfly. Drakainen knelt by a small water-filled hollow and dipped his hand into it. The water was clear but brown, like weak coffee.
Charm.
Nevermore cawed. The scout lifted his hand and examined it from all sides.
There's nothing here.
He said, disappointed.
I don't see any aura. This probably isn't a charm spot. It looks right, but nothing else.
There used to be power here.
Sifral replied.
You can tell by the plants you can feel it in the earth, but it's gone, just like that.
Drain.
Screeched Nevermore.
No charm. The wraiths took it. They went to Thorn, to the snakes. Drain. No mist. No vapor.
Right!
Drakanen muttered.
Congrats. You've never talked this much in your life. I'm starting to get it. This is a strategic resource. That's why there are wraiths, awakened, and other fun stuff. The bastard is stockpiling it. He's hoarding the songs of the gods wherever they are, and they're flocking to him, at least the ones he knows about. He's exploiting the charm spots, like this one. We're screwed, folks.
I found some residue.
Sifral reported.
It's in the berries.
In what?
The berries.
She repeated.
Some of these bushes are berry bushes. The bushes died when the power left, but the berries just dried up, trapping the aura inside. Take a closer look.
Vuko knelt and picked a shriveled, brownish fruit about the size of a raisin.
They're not toxic?
Not in the usual sense. They're cursed, but that's what you wanted. If they hadn't grown on a charm spot, they'd just give you a bit of a cleanse. But I wouldn't eat them. Who knows what they'll do? Better to use them some other way.
Unbelievable, Pichku Materinu.
Drakanen grumbled, kneeling among the dried bushes with a cup in his hand.
The world is burning, and here I am picking cursed berries.
He managed to gather half a cup of shriveled berries from the entire clearing. He shook the container and noticed a faint glimmer, like microscopic ice needles floating in cold air.
There it is,
he said.
At least a little.
He wrapped the berries in a cloth, tying it off with a leather strap.
That won't be enough.
Sifral warned.
If we reach people, you'll need to pack it airtight. To them, this is worse than Ebola.
I don't have anything like that right now,
he replied.
Back to the trail.
A little further on, he began to recognize the area. The pass where he'd found a cap belonging to one of the kidnapped children. The vast meadow he had crossed earlier in the day. He walked grimly with clenched teeth, tense and alert, his hand never leaving the hilt of his sword, constantly staying near the edge of the forest. Grunaldi Last Word's homestead was close by. Either that, or a charred skeleton of its former self, a pacified ruin with bodies chained to the palisade. Nevermore flew off to scout and didn't return. Drakanen almost reached the top of the slope, but then abruptly veered into the cover of the forest and sat down beneath a tree. He took off his pack, loosened the straps, and began rummaging through it. Then he patted the pockets of his coat, found his pipe, and clamped it between his teeth. Next he dug out his tobacco pouch and carefully sifted through the sad remnants of tobacco. Sifral hovered in front of him, watching as he painstakingly scooped pinch after pinch, finally shaking the last crumbs into the pipe.
What are you doing?
She asked.
No point in saving it,
he said, turning the pouch inside out.
If everything's fine down there, I've got 2 more packs in my luggage. My Prince Albert, and something else someone shoved into my drop capsule. And if the homestead's gone, then I'll have to fight my way through. In that case, I need to rest.
Vuko, it won't change anything.
Leave me alone. I feel sick. My stomach hurts, my hands are sweating, I'm weak, and my muscles ache. Maybe I've got the flu.
Vuko, you're scared.
He didn't respond. He found his flint, gathered some wood shavings and dry moss onto a piece of bark, and struck a spark.
Vuko, just look over the ridge. You'll know right away.
Don't bother me,
he muttered, blowing on the ember. He held up a lit twig triumphantly and brought it to the bowl of his pipe. Then he sat still, puffing clouds of aromatic smoke, gazing at the mist-covered forested hills. Sifral perched on a branch, crossing her legs impatiently. After a while, Drakanen pulled a piece of cheese, smoked meat, and a chunk of flatbread from his pack. He placed them on a leaf, then drew his sword and squinted along the blade. From a pocket near the sheath, he pulled a whetstone and began methodically sharpening the sword.
If you keep leaving her food, She'll keep following you.
Sifril finally said, unable to hold back.
I know.
He muttered, without taking the pipe from his mouth. He checked the blade with his thumb and sheathed the sword. Then he found a length of leather cord, wrapped it across his chest in a makeshift harness, and strapped his knife under his left arm, handle down, and secured the sword across his back. Sifril said nothing while he retied his boots, pulling the laces tight around his ankles.
Leaving your pack?
It slows me down,
He replied.
and I won't need it, one way or another.
He tapped out his pipe, stood up, and jumped up and down a few times to check his gear. Then he untied the leather strap on the cloth bundle of berries and slipped it into his pocket. He inhaled through his nose and exhaled through his mouth.
Vuko, everyone gets scared. It's normal.
I'd forgotten how annoying it is.
He replied.
Let's go. Bo, I really don't feel like working today.
He crept the last few dozen meters to the ridge like an automaton, tense and alert. Then he crested the ridge and scanned the valley with a quick glance. Grinaldi's homestead stood beyond a small patch of forest, its shingled roof intact and glistening faintly in the drizzle, blue smoke rising from the triangular vents under the eaves. Beyond that, the lake shimmered like polished steel. A small boat bobbed at the pier. The repaired farm buildings gleamed with fresh, planed wood. The gate was open, and a few people were milling about outside. A group of children was herding a flock of shaggy, four-horned goats toward the gate, and at the end of the pier sat a lone figure, fishing. Drakainen froze, speechless. Then he leaned against a tree and slid down to the ground, sitting.
Vuko,
Sifral said gently.
it's all right. Everything's fine. You'll go down, greet your friend, get some beer, find your horse.
Shut up, you stupid blind goat.
Drakainen mumbled.
Those are snakes. The snakes live there now. Look at their clothes, the tattoos. Grinaldi's gone. Jadrin's gone.
He sat for a moment, then stood and started down the slope.
Vuko, no!
Sifral shouted.
Don't do it! It's pointless!
He didn't reply. He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a few berries, and tossed them into his mouth.
All right,
Said the fairy slowly.
I'll handle this.